This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast, episode number 165. Today, we're talking about health. No, don't go anywhere. We're talking about your health. It should still be a good discussion. I promise that I will not let this episode go without some fat jokes at my own and Chris's expense. Speaking of which, there's Chris over there.
How's it going, Craig?
Oh, not bad. You know, it's early morning. And I'm actually genuinely excited to record this episode. I think it should be an interesting one. Chris, do you have a morning routine, like breakfast?
Yes, but it kind of varies. My ideal, like what I try to do is I either wake up, put my workout clothes on and work out right away, like go for a run, or I drive to work and then go for a run, take my shower. Our motor carrier HQ office, if I'm working in that office, we've got a shower in the building. And so
right
there I'm commuting all the way to Salt Lake. And so I try to beat the traffic. So that's typically why I run there once I've already driven there.
Nice. Okay.
It varies from a little bit day to day, but that's generally.
I thought I might ask you about that because I have my own morning routine now that involves this coffee mug, and I would like for you to take that coffee mug and describe it for our audience. Okay, so what are you looking at here?
It says "hot on fire," flashes with a Z.
And what's on the other side?
Oh yeah, old ladies.
It's like an old ladies dance crew. Why are you? I can't. Well, I found it in a thrift store, and now for like the last month, I've been drinking out of my Hot Flashes mug every single morning.
That's legit.
All right, so we're going to be talking about routines, morning and otherwise, today. Talking about staying healthy on the road. That was the longest intro segue of all time, and I'm not sorry, Chris. All right, so before we do that, we do have some other things to talk about. I'll remind everybody, of course, to go to haulinassetsllc.com, motorcarrierhq.com, and haulinassetsacademy.com for all of the information that we usually talk about. But for today, let's go ahead and move on because we do have quite a bit of discussion to get through. Before we get to the health stuff, Chris, you were mentioning fraud as an issue that you kind of wanted to bring up again. We're not doing the full episode on this right now, but what's going on in your world?
It's crazy. It seems to be a reoccurring theme that we talk a little bit about, and we've ran into some new instances in the last month or two that I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about. And it's all because of all the fraud and the double brokering that's going on. So a couple things that we've had happen is brokers and shippers, when they first screen you or vet you and decide whether they want to haul a load, want to give you a load, they screen you. And as part of that, one of the things they're doing now is they can cross-reference. So they'll look at your contact information. And if your contact information is tied to multiple companies, that's a sign, a red flag for double brokering. And so if you use a third-party dispatcher, completely legitimate, and in circumstances, I think it's the right thing to do.
You guys have done that.
And we've done that. We did that for years. But now the problem it's causing is that third-party dispatcher is typically dispatching for multiple companies. So their contact information is tied to multiple companies, which is a trigger for fraud. And so even though we haven't been using a third-party dispatcher for well over a year at this point, we've had a couple brokers in the last little while say, hey, you've got contact information tied to your company that is also tied to other companies. Explain this. And so far, it hasn't caused us big issues other than it's kind of delayed the process a little bit, and they want a good explanation for that. And once we kind of explain, hey, we used a third-party dispatcher, you can delete that contact. It's no longer a contact for us. It's worked out. But just kind of keep that in mind, and just be able to, if you use a third-party dispatcher and you run into that issue, they don't say, hey, it could be a third party. It's just, hey, your contact information is tied to multiple companies. And if you use a third party dispatcher, that's probably why. And if you can explain it that way, they'll probably be okay with it.
Interesting. Okay. So, is there anything that people need to do differently right now, or is it just understanding what the issue is and being prepared when you come up against it?
I think it's just understanding the issue and being prepared to have that answer. Like if you're not thinking third-party dispatcher is why that contact information is across other companies or is tying you to other companies, it could really throw you for a loop and you wouldn't be able to answer it, and they'd say, hey, we're not giving you a load.
Right.
But if you can explain it, then they'll typically, like, we haven't run into issues where they just have said, no, we're not letting you haul a load for us.
You have not yet?
We haven't yet, because we've been able to explain that.
Right. Okay. Anything else to say on that particular issue?
Not on the third-party dispatchers, but another thing that I want to talk a little bit about is most brokers and shippers use one of two systems to verify carriers when they bring a new carrier on to haul loads for them for the very first time. The most common one's called RMIS. That stands for Registry Monitoring Insurance Services. And the second one's Highway. And both of these systems pull the carrier's contact information from the FMCSA's database. They've got access to that, and they pull that information from there. And you, when you first registered to get your DOT number or your MC number, you input all that information into that system. And then every time you submit a new MCS 150 that you're supposed to, depending on what state you're in, update every year or every other year, or that information gets updated every time you submit that MCS 150. So if you change your phone number or your email address or anything, your mailing address, your physical address, if you change anything on that form, that is going to trigger a little bit of a red flag for these guys, the brokers and shippers. They'll see that you changed that. And what's happening is there are bad individuals out there who will get access to something, submit an MCS 150 for you or for your company without your permission, and change that contact information to their contact information. And so now what's happening is the brokers and shippers are seeing if there's been a recent change in your contact information, they get super cagey, and it makes it so they don't want it to do anything. You may have changed it completely legitimately, but there's so many of these illegitimate changes happening that it makes them super cautious when that happens. They may not, sometimes if it's happened within the last 30 days, they're just going to say, hey, we're not risking it. We're not hauling a load for you. So keep that in mind if you change contact information. One of the things I would recommend you do is, especially if it's a phone number or an email address, don't deactivate that phone number and that email address for probably a couple of months. That way they can still contact you with the phone number they have in their system, which is what they trust. They don't trust that new one yet until it's aged a little bit.
So you can add new contact information without removing the old stuff?
Well, no, you have to remove the old stuff, but you don't want to say you need to change your phone number for some reason, and you just want to completely get rid of that phone number. Don't get rid of that phone number. Be able to have access to that phone number or access to that email address, your old one, for at least 60 days until that new stuff has aged enough that the brokers and shippers will trust it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. So basically this is another example of a few idiots ruining it for the rest of us, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good to know. And what do you think? Should we get on to our main topic?
Let's get on to it. We're going to get out of the truck and out of the business and kind of focus on you this episode. So it's going to be a little different.
Yeah. And this is something that we have talked about in the far distant past, the mists of time, Chris. If people go all the way back into the first 10 or 20 episodes, we have talked about this before, but it's a topic that bears plenty of repeating, lots of reminders. Yeah. I know my fat ass needs them. So let's talk about health and fitness on the road. How do you want to back into this? How do you want to talk about this?
So, health and fitness and weight specifically can be a really sensitive topic, right?
Yeah.
And I'm kind of the type of person to each his own. Like if this isn't for you, no big deal. Like do what's good for you. This may not be an episode that you particularly love, but I think it's an important one. It's something that I have always struggled with. I'm in as most people know, the Army National Guard. So I have to maintain a certain weight standard.
Not this weekend, you're not with a beard like that.
Well, this weekend, the beard's going away.
It's I was just going to say.
It's got to be gone.
You're looking distinguished. A little salt and pepper in there. Love it.
So,
anyway.
it's different for everybody.
Sure.
Right. And it's something I've always struggled with. The military makes me maintain that certain standard. So it's something I have to do, but I constantly yo-yo. My typical pattern is in the summertime, I'll lose 20 or 30 pounds only to gain it back in the winter. And this last winter was one of my worst. Like I gained closer to 40 pounds. I just, something had to change. And, I found something that has worked better for me than about anything else I've ever tried in the past. And it feels like it's more sustainable. And it's something that I'll be able to keep up. So hopefully this coming winter, I'm not in that gain 20 or 30 pounds mode again. And I can either not gain any or maybe just gain 10 this time.
Right.
Because what I've done this summer, I'm pretty happy. I feel really, really good, better than I have in a long time. I'm at a weight that I haven't really spent much time at in my adult life. And it feels pretty good.
Well, I'm excited to see when the beard comes off, just how svelte your face looks. And also, I'm glad that we won't have to stop recording come, December, January, because you won't need to go hibernate. So that's good. This is good. All right. So you've got something that works for you. Do you want to describe what that is yet? Or is there anything else about this topic, just kind of maintaining healthy weight? Is there any reason why people should do this beyond, hey, you'll feel better? But that's kind of a nebulous thing, right?
It's just, it's obviously, the data's out there that, being overweight causes all kinds of health problems. And like I've seen that in my own self.
Watch me raise my hand sheepishly.
Yeah. I have high blood pressure, to the point where I have to be on medication for it. The weight I've lost has helped significantly with that. I can't pass a DOT physical without being on high blood pressure medication.
Really?
That's how bad my high blood pressure is.
That's
so, yeah. So, this has helped a lot with that. And so there's a myriad of reasons why you may want to do it. And if you don't, again, no judgment here, it's whatever, to each your own. But because I've had, this greater level of success, I feel like I want to share it. It's something that is trucker friendly. You can do in your truck. It does take a little bit of effort. The last time we talked about kind of the diet thing in a truck, it was kind of more focused on money saving,
sure.
right? And so this is kind of really more focused on health. And depending on how you do it, you can, it's going to be cheaper than eating out no matter what, but it's not going to be the cheapest way to feed yourself either.
Right.
If you're going to eat a little bit healthier, typically those healthier options are going to be a little bit more expensive than just, purchasing stuff at a grocery store.
Yeah. Well, anyway, all right. So as we get into this, I really like this topic because even though I don't drive truck, I do sit down all day, right? It's most days I am sitting down, and it's something that truckers and office workers have in common, right? We're on our butts a lot. And so it is something that takes consideration. You're not going to accidentally get healthy when you're sitting down all day like I am, like many of our audience are, right? So I like that we're talking about this, being deliberate. So let's talk then about your routine, the stuff that you do. Where do you want to kick off with that?
So first and foremost, first thing I want to talk a little bit about is in an overall picture of health, you've got your diet and you've got your activity level, right? And my activity level has always been high, and that's really probably the biggest reason I haven't ballooned over 300 pounds is because I run a lot or I bike a lot. I stay pretty active. I haven't made many tweaks at all, maybe a little tiny bit in my activity level. It's just really strictly been through being more conscious of my diet. And I like food a lot, and I like to eat too much food.
Sure.
And so that's really kind of what my problem is I just eat too much. And so what I've done that's been different is, and this isn't something new, you've probably heard about it, like most people I think probably have, I've been counting macros, macronutrients. And those macronutrients are carbs, fats, and proteins.
I think I'm trying to remember, they call them macros because these are the ones that you're measuring in grams and not milligrams or whatever.
Yep.
Okay. And this is actually, I love this because this is something that I've done in the past to try to maintain some control or lose some weight. And here's the magical thing about it. What's the scientific principle called? Somebody will get in the comments and yell at me for forgetting the name of it. But that idea that when you observe something, you affect its behavior in some way. And so when I first started tracking my calories, that's all I did. I made no changes, or at least I thought I made no changes to my diet. But just by looking at how many calories I was taking in, and my eyes kind of bugged out after a few days. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm eating how many calories, like, wow, breakfast cereal takes up how much of my my daily allotment? This is incredible. And just by observing, I didn't make any efforts or conscious changes, but just by looking at it, I went, whoa, okay. I look at that bowl of breakfast cereal a little bit different. And, maybe I don't pour the second bowl or whatever. And just by tracking, even before we get to macros, if you just track what you take in and look at the calorie value, it can open your eyes and you'll maybe unconsciously make some changes. So I really like this bit of advice, and we can talk about macros as well. I've got my very, very simple strategy of my own.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because I've counted calories in the past too. And when you're counting macros, to a certain extent, you're also counting calories. But you're being a little bit more conscious of the type of calories you consume, right? Because I have found that when I eat more carbs, that I can eat 2,000 calories worth of carbs versus 2,000 calories worth of protein, and I'll feel way more full when I eat more protein than I do carbs. Like if I eat 2,000 calories in carbs, I'm still going to feel hungry. Whereas I could probably eat, 1,500 calories in protein and feel overly full, right? That like those calories and where you consume them from make a difference. And I didn't know that before. And that's one of the things that, counting macros has helped me be a little bit more conscious of.
Okay. So how do you go about tracking? And then we can talk about the actual numbers you use, and, your mileage may vary and all of the caveats, but we can get into some specifics. So how do you go about doing it?
So the step one that I did was, there's a lot of professionals out there, a lot of websites where you can go in and, there's some free versions and there's paid versions, and the paid people that you pay to do this usually aren't very expensive. Like the one I used, it was $30. I answered a questionnaire, and they used that, and then they gave me what my macro split should be. So how many grams of carbs I should eat a day, how many grams of fats, and how many grams of protein. So that's kind of step one, is figure out what that breakout is. Like I said, there's stuff that you can try to figure it out on your own, or you can pay somebody, which is what I did, that figures it out for you. So that's step one. Then step two, I use an app. The app I'm using is called MyFitnessPal. There's a ton of, oh, look, you've got it right there.
You're darn right. I got it right here. Yeah, that's what I use too.
Yeah. So that app, there's quite a few others. I like it because there's a lot of convenience features. There's a free version, there's a paid version. And so that's what I use to actually track on a daily basis, really on a meal basis what I'm actually eating, and making sure I'm sticking as close as possible to those macro splits.
Right. And those macros that we're talking about, the protein, the carbohydrates, the fats, like I said, your mileage may vary. That's going to depend a lot on what your goals are, right? Are you trying to build muscle? Are you trying to lose fat? What are you trying to accomplish? And so, when I was training, I think I told you, I can't remember if I told our audience about walking through Germany. I did a 100-mile hike across Germany with a big backpack on, and it was pretty intense, right? And so to train for that, I wanted to, lose some weight because I didn't want to haul quite so much across Germany, but I also wanted to make sure that I was building my muscles, right? So I did a pretty high protein diet, and brought those carbs down, and that helped quite a lot. But anyway, we can get into those specifics.
So when you fill out those questionnaires of companies that will help you figure out what that is, those are the kind of questions they're asking. What's your activity level? What are your goals? What are you trying to do? Male, female, ask a bunch of questions like that so they can get you a split that is going to help you accomplish your goals. Because like you said, if you're trying to build muscle, it's probably going to be higher protein. If you're trying to maintain, it might be a more even split. There's different reasons to do it in different ways.
Yep. Okay. Well, let's get into the specifics. What do you eat, Chris? What is a good way to go if you want to get healthy? You want to, you've figured out what your macros should be, and now you go, oh crap, I need a lot more protein. I like to talk about fiber, Chris. Okay, pooping is important. Thank you very much. But it's not just about that. Fiber is important, protein is important, carbs are important. And so, all right, so you go to some website or you decide, here's my target for all of these, and you're probably going to say, I need to eat a lot more protein.
Yeah.
And how do you approach that sort of thing?
Most people are going to have to eat a lot more protein because we tend to just consume our calories and carbs, which I think is part of the problem, because carbs, like I said before, like I've found that, carbs don't fill me up and don't keep me as full for longer. So if there are days that I'm not perfect on things and I end up eating way more carbs than proteins, and I always, like, I'm more susceptible to cravings. I'm more susceptible to feeling hungry when I eat more carbs than I'm supposed to and don't get enough of that protein. Okay. So yeah, and that's, I think one of the reasons it works so well is because it kind of forces you to eat more protein than you typically would, and so you're going to eat less and you're going to feel fuller. The carbs and the protein, like I was eating like 10 grams less of carbs than I was protein. Fats is significantly lower. I think it was somewhere around, I want to say like 180 grams of carbs a day, 75 grams of fats, and like 190 grams of proteins.
Seriously? That is an insane amount of protein.
It's a lot of protein.
That's a ton.
It's a lot of protein.
And
so to eat that much protein, we'll talk a little bit about this. And so now, ideally, like most of the science says that you're supposed to lose about a pound a week to maintain a healthy. So when I first started on that calorie split, I was losing way more than a pound a week. And so over time, I've adjusted it to the point where now I'm eating about 2,750 calories a day. And so those macro splits, I didn't go have them reevaluate everything for me. I just used the same proportions and increased my calories. So I'm eating even more protein than that now. I'm blown away by that. And this is where I say, again, your mileage may vary, dear listener. It does. And part of the reason I have to eat that much is because my activity level is high. I sit at a desk all day long, but I also typically run 4 to 6 miles a day. So that consumes a lot of calories. Or I go out and, especially on the weekends, I may go on a 2 or 3 hour mountain bike ride. And so my activity level is pretty high. And so I've got to consume more calories to make up for that.
Okay.
But let's get into some of the specifics. So now that I've been doing this for 3 months, I've found meals that work pretty well for me. And I repeat them to a certain extent, but I've also found, okay, hey, if I'm eating a lot of calories during one meal, or a lot of like carbs during one meal, I know some other foods that I can eat in the other meals to offset that. And we'll talk a little bit about tips later on in near the end of the episode. But one of the things that I do is, if I know I'm going out to eat with friends on a Friday night, I'll try to plan out what I'm eating that night and use that as kind of my base meal, and plan everything else around that to accommodate, a meal that's going to be probably higher in carbs or higher in calories than everything else. And I've found, like, I can be pretty liberal in one meal if I'm pretty conservative in the other two.
Right.
And so typically I try to, my breakfast and my lunch, I typically try to be more conservative with what I eat. So then for my dinner, I can be a little bit more flexible.
One way to think about that is, we talk about your daily intake, and that's important, right? You do want to know what you did today and what you're going to do tomorrow and all that, but you don't necessarily have to always think of it as, I reached my number and I'm done. I heard one person describe it as rolling 3-day average. So what was the previous 3 days? What was your average intake on all these things? You can't go too far back, right? Yeah. You can't count it every week. But it's like, hey, today I was a little bit high on my fats. And if tomorrow I back that off a little bit extra, that it helps even it out. Like I say, it's not going to work over a super long period of time, but you don't have to panic. Right. If one day is a little bit off in one direction.
Yeah, and I do that. So knowing me, guess what I've done?
Okay, wait. Does it involve Excel?
It does, yeah. So I've got another spreadsheet that I kind of track. I've really nerded out on it. So I can track it a little bit more on like a daily or multiple day or weekly basis. Because if you're over in calories in one day, but you can make up for it a little bit in the next day. And really, I look at it kind of across the week. You're fine. Like, and you're gonna have bad days. Like, don't beat yourself up about that. You're gonna have moments of weakness. If you can be,
moments of fun, Chris. Let's call them moments of fun.
Moments of fun. If you're good 80 to 90% of the time, it's gonna make a difference.
All right. So let's do specifics then. What do you eat for breakfast, Chris?
So. My typical breakfast, my breakfasts don't vary a ton. I've got, my go-tos are Greek yogurt, and Greek yogurt because it's higher in protein than your regular yogurt. Mm-hmm. And then you can get them in all kinds of different flavors. And then cottage cheese.
With fresh fruit? Thank you.
Sometimes, yes, not all the time. But I like this. My wife does not. I will mix essentially half of Greek yogurt and half, so like one serving of Greek yogurt and one serving of cottage cheese. If I'm eating just cottage cheese, I usually do 2 servings of cottage cheese or 2 servings of yogurt. But I actually really like to mix them, and sometimes I'll add fruit to it. So that's one of my go-tos. Another one's oatmeal, and I'll put kind of some of what I do, more specifics like recipes, a few of the things in the show notes, so go check that out. But like for my oatmeal, and this is something, again, yogurt's easy to carry in a truck because you got a fridge. So is cottage cheese. I'll also do egg witches. There's these little, it's like an egg McMuffin, except for instead of a biscuit, it uses the egg as the essentially the bread. So they're super high in protein. But with the oatmeal, if I'm trying to be super conservative, I'll use water instead of milk, but I rarely do that. I usually use milk. But I'll take a Tupperware, I'll throw oatmeal in it, milk, protein powder. That's a good way to get protein. So like you throw vanilla, a scoop of vanilla protein powder, it's like 30 grams of protein. It actually makes the oatmeal, I think, taste better. And then you throw some fruit in there, shake it up, leave it in the fridge overnight, and the next morning you don't have to cook it or anything. It's ready to go. And that's really good. And then another thing, I never was a big fan of protein shakes, but I've found a couple that I really like. And this first one, I think it tastes like a Reese's peanut butter cup. It's so good. Yeah. So I'll do this one on a pretty regular basis, and I'll put the recipe in the show notes. But it's basically like a protein shake that's a Reese's peanut butter cup.
This reminds me of when I went to a dinner party once, which sounds way fancier than it was. A bunch of friends getting together for dinner. It's a dinner party. And somebody brought pie, but they're vegan. And it was a chocolate pie. And they said, well, we're vegan, so the chocolate is actually made from avocados. But you'll never notice. You can never tell the difference. And it was a mark of how long they had been vegan. That they were like, oh, it's just like chocolate. And all the rest of us are like,
No,
yeah,
it's not.
So to hear you say, oh, yeah, no, this protein shake, it's great. It tastes just like a Reese's peanut butter cup. Well, you're giving me flashbacks here, Chris.
Maybe not exactly like a Reese's peanut butter cup, but it's pretty good. It's a good protein shake.
Yeah. Okay. So those are some ideas, and for breakfast. And like you said earlier, these should all be relatively trucker friendly. So let's move on then to lunch. What do you do for lunch?
So lunch, especially if I'm really trying to be conservative, sometimes I'll essentially just have like 8 to 12 ounces of chicken breast. Because chicken breast, super high in protein, very low in fat, 0 carbs.
Yep.
And so I'll do that. And you know what? I did a little bit of a test to see how friendly we could have this be on the road. I've talked about this before, but I've got a thing that's called a Road Pro oven. And it looks like a lunchbox, but it's got a heating element in it. You plug it into a cigarette lighter. It's 12 volts. And I cooked a chicken breast with it.
Wow.
It gets warm enough, and it took about 30 minutes. So like you can just throw it in there while you're driving. I put tin foil in the bottom of it.
What could go wrong?
But what could go wrong? It just, you throw it in the box, you plug the thing in, and 30 minutes later, voila, you throw some seasoning on your chicken breast, and you've got a good chicken breast. And I can be a minimalist when I eat. My wife, again, this is another one of the things she doesn't like, but I'll eat just that chicken breast and be happy. I mean, 8 or 11 ounces of chicken breasts, that's a lot of chicken, and it'll keep you full for quite a while.
You're like a freaking caveman, Chris. You just like grab the chicken and bite it, right? Okay. Yeah. So that's another one for me. I like doing that. You probably can't do this as easily, but I like to cut up a chicken breast into some soup, some like high protein, high fiber soup.
And honestly, you could do that because that lunchbox, it's just got a metal bowl essentially, and it looks almost kind of like a bread pan, and you could make a soup in that. That
nice.
Wouldn't be that hard to do.
Okay. Anything else for lunch to recommend?
Another common lunch thing for me are sandwiches, but I'll typically use pita bread because it's lower carbs, lower calories than regular bread. And so I'll either just throw in like some pastrami or some other kind of lunch meat and cheese. And then I usually don't use mayo. My wife will. If you're sparing on the mayo, you can use mayo. But I'll usually just use mustard.
Yeah, mustard is like, it's almost calorically low. It's
I honestly
negligible.
don't even record the mustard.
Yeah.
Because it's almost nothing.
You can load up on that stuff.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
So then my wife makes this really good healthy chicken salad. There's lots of recipes for that kind of thing. And I can fill that up in a pita. And again, it's going to be super low, everything but protein, and it's good. So that's another one of my really common lunches.
Nice. Okay.
And then I'll still, for business, I'll still on a fairly regular basis meet clients for lunch or vendors for lunch somewhere. And I've found I can be super good with my lunch choices. And, I don't always eat the entire meal. Like one of my favorite places is this. Have you ever had burrito tacos?
No.
They're so good. They're like my favorite taco place is kind of out by our Motor Carrier HQ headquarters. Well, anyway, they bring you 4 of these burrito tacos, and it's mostly cheese and meat other than the taco shell. And it's cooked in like a beef stew. And that's what and then you dip it. So it's like a French dip. You dip the taco into the stew. It's really good. I'll only eat 2 of them instead of all 4 of them. And honestly,
you coward.
All 4 of them kind of make me sick because it's a lot of food. But I'll do stuff like that. Another one of the places that we seem to go more often is Mo Betta's, and
Hawaiian food.
Hawaiian food. They've got a macaroni salad that's like unreal good, but it's also 500 calories, just the salad.
And it's also pure salt.
Yeah. So I'll skip on that, and I'll get mostly just meat and a little, white rice. I'll get 1 scoop of rice. I'll get their mini bowl, 1 scoop of white rice, and then it comes with 8 ounces of chicken.
Right on.
And it's, that's plenty to fill you up.
Yep.
And then I'll still have burgers. Like I probably have burgers at least once a week, whether it's for lunch or dinner. But I'll skip the bun, and I'll have fries. But I won't
Chris,
large size the fries, just regular fries.
just because there's hamburger involved, it does not make it a burger. If you skip the bun, it ain't a burger.
All right. Well, then whatever you want to call it, lettuce in a bun.
It's a beef wrap.
A beef wrap, yeah. And I don't do that all the time. I'll still get the bun on occasion, but I honestly, and this might be partially due to my age, I find that if I eat a hamburger with the bun and French fries, like I feel overly full and sick.
Yeah.
And so if I skip the bun and just eat, the beef in a wrap, whatever you want to call it, Craig.
Sorry, it's like the old question: is a hot dog a sandwich? Right? Right. Say, is it a burger without the bun?
It may not be, but whatever it is, whatever that piece of food is, I'll eat that and fries and feel great, and I don't kill myself in my macro splits or my calories.
Right. Okay. So, what about dinner? Any strategies around dinner? I'm hearing lots of chicken and dairy. Chicken and dairy.
Yeah, I do eat quite a bit of chicken. So one of my dinner options, speaking of chicken, you go to like your local grocery store. Most grocery stores have that rotisserie chicken that they cook fresh.
Yeah.
It's a staple at the Vernon household. We eat those fairly regularly.
Yeah, tell me more. Oh, I love those rotisserie.
They're so good.
The Costco ones.
Yeah. That's usually where we get them from, Costco. So anytime I go to Costco, we typically get one of those. Sometimes if I really want to splurge on myself, you know what else I get at Costco?
A giant thing of cashews.
Close. A giant thing of the shrimp cocktail. It's not cheap, but it's really good. And same thing with shrimp, all protein. And I love shrimp cocktail.
Whatever you do, Chris,
that's how I treat myself.
Do not fart in my studio. Okay.
I don't think shrimp makes me that gassy.
No? Okay. Well, to each his own, I guess. All right. Any other dinner options or fill in the crack snacks?
Breakfast burritos, omelets. And oftentimes you can get breakfast burritos at like a truck stop if you needed to. You know, some places you go to and the breakfast burritos like
4.5 pounds.
The size of a brick. Yeah. Don't eat the whole thing in one sitting, like cut it in two, and that makes two meals. You'll save some money and your health. So those are the big things. Oh, fish.
Fish is
I'll
huge.
eat a lot of fish. I like fish, but it's never been like a regular staple in my diet, but it's becoming more so. So if you love to fish, go out and fish, keep your fish and eat that. Most of the grocery stores, like fresh fish is hard, because you have to go to the grocery store all the time. But, you mentioned Costco. Costco's got big bags of mahi that's frozen, or tilapia, or, those are the kind of like, I like whitefish mostly. Catfish is really good.
You're disappointing me here, Chris. Catfish is fine, but nah.
I'd rather
salmon
have,
through and through.
Yeah, I like salmon too, but I like whitefish. So halibut, mahi, tilapia. Those are some of my favorites for sure.
Okay.
But super, super good to eat.
All right. So we've got some meal options, but oftentimes you get a little peckish out on the road, Chris. You want to fill in those cracks with some snacks. What do you do?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about snacks. So again, sometimes I will forget to eat. And so then like a snack in the middle of the day. And so when it comes lunchtime or dinner time, I'm so hungry that I can't make myself stop eating. And so one of the ways that I combat that is I've got an alarm set on my watch so that or on my phone, it goes off at 10 o'clock in the morning to remind me to eat a snack. And it goes off again at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to remind me to eat a snack. So I'll at least do that. Sometimes if I start to feel a little bit hungry, I'll eat something else. And there's some snacks like I feel zero guilt. Like if I want to eat a second snack between a meal, I'll eat those like and not feel bad at all about it. So the biggest one that I do that with is beef jerky. If I feel like if I eat beef jerky, you can find beef jerkies out there that have almost zero carbs, and you can find beef jerkies that are pretty low in fat and just almost essentially protein. So find different types of beef jerky that, you can, if you need just protein, it may not be your favorite type of beef jerky, but you're kind of splurging on other meals. So you'll eat one that's just basically protein, and I'll eat a few ounces of that as a snack and feel zero guilt about. So that's one of my big snacks. Protein drinks is another one, and you can get all kinds of protein drinks. So there's, ones that are just a powder. Those are usually a little bit cheaper. If you're looking for convenience, you can get, the already made protein drinks. And there's actually there's one that I get that I hide from my kids. Like I put back in the Diet Coke box that they're not going to reach into because it's like chocolate milk. My kids will drink 3 of them a day, and they're like almost $2 a bottle. So,
and this is why your kids are all jacked, right?
Well, yeah, maybe. So I hide that kind of stuff. It's more expensive, but it's convenient. But there's tons of them that are really good, and you just kind of have to experiment a little bit and find them. So if you're going to use those bottles, what I recommend is you don't go buy them at your convenience store because they're really expensive. Mm-hmm. Buy them in bulk at like a Costco or a Sam's Club or Walmart or somewhere else where you're buying 15 of them at a time.
Okay.
Another protein bars. That's probably like my 10 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Very common as a protein bar. Again, experiment with them. They're good.
You got to find the right one because
some of them are bad.
Some of them are just nasty.
So, like one of my favorites is Fit Crunch. You see them all over the place. There's a mint chocolate one that's really good. There's a peanut butter one that's really good. They're like 180 or 90 calories each one, and they they'll help take that edge off between meals. Boiled eggs, I'll do those cheap. And then there's another thing, there's lots of recipes for this. They're egg muffins. They're essentially, you take this, follow this recipe and you'll put, you may put, some of them have spinach, some of them have bacon, some of them have turkey in them, but you basically just take this egg mixture that you've put a bunch of stuff in and then put it in muffin pans, and it makes kind of, a little shallow muffin type thing. Egg bites is sometimes what they're called. They're really good. So I'll eat some of those too.
Right on. Okay. So now we've got some specifics. I remember when you were out on the road a few years ago, you were counting peanut M&Ms, and you'd give yourself a daily peanut M&M allotment, or you talked about a Snickers bar, having a decent amount of protein for a candy bar.
Yeah.
So that would be more of a meal replacement than a snack necessarily.
Not necessarily. Like I'll sometimes have like Snickers bars, if as not the king size, but like the regular size Snicker bar.
You're not an animal.
I'm not an animal. The regular size Snickers bar is not that much different than a protein bar. So sometimes instead of a protein bar, especially if I'm out on the road and I forgot something, a Snickers is a good way to supplement that.
Right.
I won't eat that in addition to the protein bar, but I'll replace the protein bar with a Snickers bar and not feel bad at all about it.
Yep. Okay. Well, let's finish up with some kind of general tips then. You've got an idea of some things you can do in your meal planning, but there are general principles to follow once you have all of these specific foods in mind. So let's go through some of those general tips.
So the first one is don't let yourself get hungry. I've found that if I let myself get hungry when it comes to a mealtime, I'm way more susceptible to cravings. I'm going to eat something I probably shouldn't, and I'm going to way overeat, which is the biggest problem. And so that's why I'm like pretty religious. I've set that alarm on my phone so that I don't forget to eat that at least one snack between meals, because if I don't, then I get to that meal and I just way overdo it. And so I think that's really important. Another thing that I think is really important, we talk about those macro splits. I focus on eating my protein, make sure I get those grams of protein. I don't do it every day, but I try to do it most days because I've found that I feel like, I don't know this for sure. I'm not a nutritionist. I don't understand necessarily the science behind things, but my suspicion is those carbohydrates, most of the carbohydrates you eat, they just go through you so much faster that, you may eat a meal that's heavy in carbohydrates and 2 hours later, you're hungry again, or an hour later, you're hungry again. Whereas when I'm eating something that's really heavy in protein, I may be able to last several more hours because it's high in protein. So if you hit that protein goal, everything else just seems to fall in place pretty well.
Yeah. Here's another one for you. And I just know this is going to be on your list. Drinks. Careful with what you drink, because you can drink a ton of calories through sugar, right? So if you do a lot of soda or what have you, I would throw beer in there. Easy on the beer, guys. Again, raise his hand from experience. You can balloon up pretty quick.
Yeah, don't drink your calories. That's the way I look at it. Yeah, for sure. So like things like coffee, drink as much of that as you want.
If it's black.
I was gonna say, as long as it doesn't have a ton of like sugar in it or cream or anything else, diet sodas and best is water.
Right.
And this is one of those things that's a little harder for truckers, right? Because
you can't just be peeing all the time.
Yeah, some people will feel comfortable using the restroom while they're driving.
Okay. Well, now we're getting into it.
Some don't. And so, it's just, it's up to you, but the more water you can drink, the better. 'Cause that kind of also helps with cravings a little bit. So, I understand that's not always easy to do when you're driving a truck, but do the best you can with what you've got. Don't beat yourself up if you're not perfect. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to have moments of weakness. Chalk that up to, I'll do better tomorrow, and do better tomorrow.
And I gotta say, Chris, I like my formulation. It's not a moment of weakness. It's a moment of fun.
Yeah, there you go.
Those are going to happen every now and then, and that's
okay.
fine.
Yeah.
Don't kill yourself over, trying so hard to be 100% all the time. It's all right.
Yeah. And speaking of eating for fun, so one thing that one of my buddies in the National Guard said that has really stuck with me is eat to fuel your body, or eat for fuel, not for fun. And I don't think you have to follow that 100%, but if you can follow it most of the time where you're eating to make sure your body has the fuel it needs to function well, you're not just eating out of pleasure or eating to console yourself, like you're gonna do a lot better.
Yeah. All right. Well, Chris, I feel like we have now beaten this topic thoroughly to death. But are there any final thoughts? Anything else you want people to think about? Just
be patient with yourself. Especially if you're going from bad eating habits to trying to transition to good eating habits. It's not going to happen overnight. Don't beat yourself up. Give yourself a little bit of grace. Try to be good 80 or 90% of the time. And, especially if you're used to eating large quantities of food, like it takes a few days or a week for your body to kind of get used to those smaller quantities. And if you're eating mostly protein, it's really not that small of quantities, but it may take a little adjustment period for your body, but your body will adjust.
I should show you what I used to eat for lunch. I would get, the big tins of tuna, not the small ones, but the big ones. I would empty a giant tin of tuna and then put black beans and peppers and tomatoes and mustard in there and mix it all up. It looked like garbage. But it was this huge bowl. And it was all of 350 calories, maybe, and I would just get loads of protein. Anyway, so yeah, you can actually eat quite a lot. You'd be shocked if you eat the right things. If you get your calories the right way, you'd be shocked at how much you will eat.
That actually sounds really good. I'm gonna have to try.
It's not bad. I can show you what I did. The last thing I was gonna say is, like you said, be patient with yourself. It doesn't happen overnight. If I could give people one piece of advice here, it would be start with breakfast. If you do breakfast right, it makes a huge difference. in how hungry you're going to be through the day. And so you don't have to be 100% different or better on day one, but if you just start switching out switching in some better options for breakfast, you'll be able to see that difference, and that'll maybe motivate you to, okay, now do a little bit better at lunch. And wow, my afternoons, I feel much better. I have more energy. I'm more alert. Hey, that's important for a trucker. And it'll kind of have that snowball effect if you start with breakfast. So there
Awesome.
you go. That's mine. Chris, like I said, I think we've beat this one to death. So let's go ahead and get out of here, and we'll talk about some financials next episode.
Yep.
So we'll be back for that. Thanks everybody for all 6 of you that are still listening. We appreciate you, and let us know if there are any topics you want us to cover. Find us on Facebook. Go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com and let us know what's on your mind, what questions you would have for us to address. Chris, I will see you next time.
See you then.